Hello, everyone in the internet. Mark Hayward here, and welcome to the IJA panel on the state of the professional juggler. We've got a whole bunch of different kinds of panelists today. We've got jugglers of various varieties, and just to make some quick introductions for everybody, and panelists, please make corrections if needed. This is just stuff off the top of my head that I know about each of you. So first of all, we've got Bree Crabtree. Bree has a very playful approach to the way she performs, and she focuses on kids shows, works primarily on the West Coast of the United States. Sean Gandini is joining us from London. He is in the theater and art realm, mostly working in Europe. His performances often have a serious tone. He frequently leads or produces large groups of jugglers or performers. Gina Schwartzman-Christiani she has a glitzy and high energy style, very highly technical style as well. And she does circus and large events when she is not making fabulous costumes for her clients. Michael Rosman is an East Coast USA comedy guy who is super high energy and all about big stunts that fit into a van. He works hard to perform at any event he can squeeze himself into. I'm Mark Hayward. I do comedy in a very low-key, witty, deadpan manner with a broad client base from libraries to trade shows to corporate. So we tried to get a fairly broad group of jugglers together for this panel. We only had space for 5, so we couldn't get people from every continent, but we tried to do what we could here. And just to get this out of the way right off the bat, this festival is presented free to everyone in the world, but there are, of course, costs involved. If you would like to donate to help support the IJA and help make this festival continue to run, please do that. We've got a donation screen that is up, I believe, right now, festival.juggle.org/donate, and you can make donations there to help keep this going. Welcome, panel.
Thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Mark.
Well, you're welcome. I hope nobody was embarrassed by it. So panel, everyone make sure you're unmuted, and we're gonna dive right in. I wanna start by looking back at the past. So we're talking about the state of the professional juggler. So mostly we're talking about now, but just to establish where we're coming from, we have in this panel people of varying ages and different stages of career. And so the first question I wanna go with is, when you first started out, what kind of work did you think you were going to do before you got started? And then how is that different from the shows that you do now? So I'm just going to pick somebody, and I'm going to have, since Gina, I believe, started the youngest of all of us. Gina, do you want to lead off on this question?
Sure, no problem. I was born in the circus. I am originally from Russia. And I grew up seeing my father perform and my mom perform. She was an aerialist and my father was a juggler. And ever since I can remember, I started when I was 6, I knew that that's what I was going to do. I was going to grow up and be a performer, and I was going to be a juggler. The way that my life has changed a little bit from what I thought that I was going to do. I used to travel all the time and perform in different circuses the entire year long. And now my life has changed a little bit, where I fly out and I do performances here and there. And I come back home to the business that I created, which is making costumes and art. So I'm kind of balancing between the two lives. And I also have a little son. So coming back home and creating things and making costumes to sell and also hanging out with him. So I'm not away from him, my whole life. That seems to be working pretty good.
Nice. All right, Sean, how about you?
For me, I got into juggling actually really late. When I was about 6, I think I wanted to be a clown, and I did a lot of magic and some artistic painting, but I did kind of get into juggling with the idea that maybe there was some different perspective on it. And at the time when I started, I didn't really know how that was possible. So I started on the street, as I think a lot of jugglers doing street shows. And actually, bizarrely, I think I've been fortunate in that I've ended up pretty much where I would have wanted it.
That's great.
Maybe luck, like life strange things, you always assume that you got to where you are by a rational process, but maybe it's also you get lucky at certain points. But yeah, that's my journey, complicated. But I started much later juggling than Gina. I only got serious when I was maybe 16, 17.
All right. And how about you, Michael?
Actually, I got started later than that. I was probably a senior in high school. I was in college. I sort of discovered juggling. I had really no real exposure to the performing arts prior to that. My first shows were seeing jugglers were street performers, and that was pretty much my first experience was as a street performer as well. And then I went on to clown college where I learned a lot about performing. And then, but early on, I just took whatever gigs somebody offered me as a way to have this outlet to perform the tricks that I had learned. And then, over the years, it's been a lot of years, just changed and morphed and turned and, accepted jobs, figured out, how to be great at those jobs and got into different markets. And over the years, I've pretty much dabbled in all of the different markets. And so that's that brings us to here now.
Right. All right. And how about you, Bree?
I started juggling when I was about 15 or 16, and I always loved the Gandinis, and I always loved Peter Davison and all the silent acts. And so my vision of being a juggler was to be more of an artistic silent act. And then I found out how difficult that was. And eventually I embraced the part of me that is very good at verbal comedy. And I am very good at just thinking off the top of my head and reacting to people in the moment. So I thought I would be one thing, and it turned out I denied a part of myself and then finally let that in. And so now I do comedy juggling with families.
Nice. Yeah, and for me, I started as a street performer. My inspiration was the Flying Karamazov brothers. So I figured I'm going to be in the stage. I'm going to have the lights and the fame, and I have my own dressing room. And that almost never happens. I am now mostly a combination. The thing I tell people is that I will work anywhere that there's an audience and a budget. So as long as they're going to pay me enough and they're happy to see me, I'm happy to be there. So it's anything from scouts and libraries to I've been doing trade shows lately where I draw people into a booth using my charm and my skills. So it's, anything and anywhere, and I'm happy to be there. So that leads us to the next thing. Let's talk a little bit about pivots and roadblocks. So what are some times when you have had something where you've had to make a major change in your life, or had some major block, and how did you deal with it? I'm just gonna start with somebody, but if anyone wants to talk, just raise your hand or start talking or whatever. So Sean, do you want to address that one?
Well, actually today during the day, because it's nighttime here, and I was thinking about this notion of professional juggler, and I thought actually what it means is somebody who's managed to transform juggling into money. I guess in its simplest form is that it's who's managing to sell juggling. And one of the things, I'm really convinced that we're in the golden age of juggling. There's so much just mind-blowing juggling across the whole globe, but with varying degrees of transforming that. And I would say one of the obstacles we had with our kind of stubborn artistic vision when we started was understanding how to turn things into money. And so we would take, I guess it's what people were saying about taking any gig. And I sometimes feel like we still, post-COVID, where I briefly thought, well, I would just just juggle for money. But that transformation, initially we would take all kinds of commercial stuff in order to fund the other stuff. And then strangely enough, the stuff that's been financially the most rewarding for us has really been unexpected for me. Like, for example, we have this tribute to Pina Bausch, which is 9 jugglers with 100 apples. And I never would have thought that we could have sold that 1,000 times. So I'm very intrigued by this idea of all the different ways people make money from juggling, whether it's the amazing street kids of South America, traffic lights, And how much do they make compared to, I don't know, somebody that's working the clubs in the US, or a traditional circus juggler or a soleil juggler, or the weird bubble of subsidized European juggling, which I feel like compared to the North American scene is really kind of surreally different. The other day, there's a festival in Paris at the Maison de Jonglage, and I was clicking to see a little bit to inform myself. And I thought, my God, this is so unsellable if there wasn't a funding system. But it exists. So in a way, they've convinced somebody to give them money. So it exists and it's getting money. So it's professional. Yeah. I don't know if I've answered the question or gone off, but the idea of how you transform juggling into money is very intriguing to me.
Yeah. I'm going to go to Michael next because I want to add something for both Gina and Bree to this. So Michael, what about you for pivots and roadblocks?
So for me, I kind of realized a few years ago that I was more, when I wanted to do less traveling, I thought of myself more as like a special events performer. So it wasn't so much like I'm going to go out there and do juggling, because I would get calls for all different kinds of things. And to be a professional performer, I would just take them and figure out how to make them work. So because of that, I have, 3 penny farthings and 65 or 70 unicycles. And I've got curtains and backdrops and whatever is needed to be a special events performer, because that's the kind of gig that I can do and stay home and not just be stuck on a ship somewhere or do a tour of Renaissance festivals or something. So I actually had a really amazing pivot, but it was not really juggling oriented, but it was still performance in that, 5 or 6 years ago, I bought a stage truck from Paul Anderson down in Florida because his wife didn't want it in his driveway. And so I had it in my driveway. And then when COVID happened, my daughter was graduating college and felt bad that we weren't going to be able to give her, she wasn't going to have a real graduation. And I realized I have a stage in my driveway. And so we decorated it to look like a college stage. And I had a podium in my barn from other special events. And we put our school logo on the front and we put curtains behind it. And it had steps going up and across and down. And the next thing I knew, I'm like, we can have graduations here. I called a friend of hers who's a family who's graduating daughter, same school. And they're like, yeah, we'll be there. We'll be there in 2 hours. And next thing I know, we did almost 80 of them in last May and June, all around the region. And actually I ended up with taking flatbed trailers and turning them into additional graduation mobiles. I wasn't actually juggling on these stages for these shows, but it was actually really emotionally and fun and rewarding for me to be able to do this. It was still performing and I had jokes in it. It was still comedy, but it was also serious. And it was a really great experience for me. And we even did them this year. And we were doing graduations last August with, people who were barefoot graduating. And then, because they were all going into the backyard swimming pool as soon as they finished up in their driveway. So it wasn't strictly a juggling pivot, but it was, I'm a full-time entertainer. And now I'm going to pivot in this direction with this stage truck. And then of course, with the stage truck, I was able to do lots of outdoor events throughout the whole COVID year. And I was doing, I walked tight wire off the roof of the truck and I did all kinds of events. Just people were like, okay, it's February, but we want to have an event and it's going to be cold. And I'm like, it's going to be cold. And you know what? I'm going to be there and I'm going to be smiling and I'll figure out how to juggle with cold fingers, because
your mobile graduation is one of graduation shows. That's one of my favorite COVID adapting strategies. And we're going to get to talking about the pandemic in a little bit. But before we get there, I want to hear, Bree, let's have you go next with roadblocks and pivots, but also specifically as a female juggler, I want to know, and this is, I realize, an enormous topic, but can you touch a little bit on how it's different being a professional female juggler?
I think my first major roadblock was trying to walk away from any sort of 9-to-5 job and embracing the fact and trusting that I could make a living here in the San Francisco Bay Area and afford to pay all of my expenses and save money on top of that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this. And so that was my first greatest roadblock, was figuring that out. And that it also goes hand in hand with doing any kind of job that comes your way and saying yes to almost everything. In regards to being Female juggler, I honestly do not think about that day to day here in the Bay Area. I don't think a lot of other people think about it day to day either, especially in the family entertainment world. I've not gotten jobs because I was not a gentleman juggler, and I tried to convince them I was the woman version with umbrellas and parasols. You know, if you don't fit a look, you don't fit a look, and I don't take it too personally and think about it's super gender based at all sometimes.
Mhm.
However, on the flip side, at trade shows, me representing myself as a woman, I have experienced a lot of disbelief, a lot of people asking me more questions than they would ask my male juggler peers. How can you do the show by yourself? Where's your partner? Things along that nature. Those are mentally challenging, and I was really getting a little bit depressed about some of those things. And then the pandemic hit.
Wait, did that solve the problems or make them worse?
No, it solved I feel like there's a wall, and I'm constantly trying to scramble over it, and the wall burst down, and all of these new markets opened up for me.
That's awesome. All right, we'll hear more about that later because you're another great pandemic success story. Gina, let's go to you for roadblocks, pivots, and if you feel like you have a different experience as a female performer.
Roadblocks and pivots. I would probably go back to the last economic crash when the entertainment industry definitely took a hit. I certainly did. My contracts that year just dried up, and I needed to get a regular job. I've always really loved art, so I decided to become a cake decorator at a bakery store. And it was fulfilling in the way that I was able to draw and, you know, have my own canvas that I could create whatever image I wanted to. But I really, really, really hated it. And I could not wait to be done. And it was probably the longest 8 months of my entire life. And I got a contract in Bahamas, which was not great, but it was just I was really happy to receive it because that started up my entertainment career back up. And slowly but surely I got busier and busier, but that year I knew I needed a backup. And so I decided to become more of an artist because, you know, that's a really smart backup to an artist career. Anyways, I just know that I want to create all the time. And so that is what would make me really happy. So I started to draw more. I started to make more costumes. And thanks to Facebook and word of mouth and clients posting the costumes that I made them, my artistry business picked up a little bit. So then I started to dive into both those things and still take gigs and try to make more things to create and sell and grow my business. Let me see. And yeah, I mean, probably the biggest roadblock was COVID. But like you said, we'll be talking about COVID later on. And to answer your other question, if I felt that if me being a woman has harmed my career at all or not, I don't think so. However, there has been times where I felt like the shows were looking for male jugglers, and I couldn't understand why specifically they were looking for male performers. But it's just a thought that I had to not spend my time or lose my sleep over. So I just wanted to better myself as much as possible.
And has it been hard for you to balance your two careers, your performing versus the costume making?
I think that the difficult part about that is I can't really take very long contracts, and sometimes I want to. So sometimes it's like I have two worlds battling, which one is going to take over. But if I situate and organize my time and pick the gigs that I really want to do, and also be on time with all my costume orders, that would be great. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult. Like I need to finish a certain amount of costumes in order to go do the gig. So.
Right. All right. So I want to, unless anyone has anything they want to add, I want to pivot a little bit to the next thing, which is talking about up and coming performers. Is there, we're doing this forum right now in the context of the IJA convention, and are there things that that you all think would be helpful for up and coming performers, whether it's something from the IJA, something from us, like advice, and this sort of goes into the next question as well, which is whether there's the number of pros that has changed in recent times. So let's start with things that would be helpful. So anything that you can think of that either was helpful for you, or really what we want is something that'd be helpful for someone now, because someone starting in the career today is having a different experience than I had when I started. So who has something that might be useful for an up and coming performer today?
I mean, I don't know if it's useful, but I would suggest to think laterally, because I feel like the world is changing tremendously and maybe forever. And I think maybe we need to be, if I go back to this idea that we are selling a fantasy of juggling, the selling of art is always a selling of a fantasy. And how, like, for example, there's this NFT, this curious NFT world. Maybe some young juggler is going to turn up and make 3 million on that, selling little 30-second juggling patterns. Or I feel like thinking differently, and certainly what Michael was saying about building the truck of what breathe, these ideas of COVID, creative COVID thinking. But I do think that we need to think laterally a little bit. And I do feel bad for people coming out of circus school or starting their career now, in that a lot of the accepted or the usual ways of making a living from juggling are changing or non-existent in some cases.
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent point, because it's when I've talked to jugglers who are vastly my senior, and I've heard this from Dan Holtzman, I heard it from Lottie Brunn, that the thing that was the bread and butter of their careers, or the thing that got them really started in it, doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So I think your advice, Sean, of think laterally and think in unusual ways, I think that's really critical, because since I'm already established and I've been doing this for 30 years, I don't have to do that now. But a young person starting out is going to have to explore and figure out what works today.
Yeah, I've been saying for a while that I'm really glad I'm not a 25-year-old kid starting out, because there are just so few venues. There's just so few places. So there's less markets, less performers. And, if somebody's got crazy skills, you might have to sort of make your own market, which is what people are doing now on social media. But it's got to be really challenging now. And of course, if you are going to be a full-time performer, I think it's really good to have some side income as well. I used to tell people the most important thing if you're starting out is to get as much training as possible, to get as good as you can before you start getting out there. Take the extra couple months, go to go study with somebody else, go to a different program, take more classes in performance, all different kinds. But, now I don't even know if that's enough.
It's really interesting how different we all look at this. Dan Holtzman just posted something on Facebook, I think yesterday, saying, challenging the conventional wisdom that when you first start out, your first 100 shows or your first 1,000 shows don't count. I actually think that the first 100 shows don't count is great advice, but mostly in the context of doing street shows where you can crank out, 5 or 10 if you really want to go for it in one day and get all of that being terrible out of the way. But if you don't have access to something like that, then Dan's point was that if you engage in more training, and if you engage in talking to your peers and analyzing and careful writing, then you can reduce the number of terrible shows that you have to do.
Absolutely. I followed that thread. That was really interesting.
Yeah.
And my advice in that thread was, I go back to the tricks and having a cohesive combination that you are performing. And so during practice, if you do at least 10 times this trick perfectly, it's ready. And then a friend of mine said, well, 10 times perfectly in practice, but then take that trick and put it into the combination with everything else, that's a whole other step that you have to perfect. So if you don't have those 100 shows, if you are not booked, 100 times the next couple of months, then just perfecting your routine over and over and over again will help. But of course, experience helps a whole bunch.
Yeah. And the one thing that you cannot prepare for in advance is the terror of being on a stage in front of people.
That's true.
I have given people specific advice about, use any opportunity for public speaking, do the announcements at work, get in front and do the bingo at church, like whatever you have, whatever opportunity you have to get in front of people to get used to that terror and the flop sweat and all that is helpful.
That's exactly what my advice is to step out of the juggling world and forget about the tricks for a little bit and dive into the clown workshops, because I think clown workshops elevated my stage presence, elevated how comfortable I was on stage. And in those workshops, they make you go out there with nothing. And it's all about listening to the audience. And if something goes wrong during your juggling performance, like, who cares about the props? It's about how you recover from that, how you handle it. And
I think actually sorry to interrupt, but I think the most important thing is you need to learn to be a self-promoter, because that part of the industry is no longer around, where you have an agent who likes you, takes you into their stable and promotes you. And now it seems like almost everything that you do is self-promotion. And I come up with ideas all the time, and most of them don't go anywhere because I don't want to sit there and promote it. So I think that's the most important thing right now, is if you have something that you want to sell, your show, anything, a trick, a video that you've made, you need to be completely fluent in social media and all of that. And you need to have a presence in every social media, and it's no longer just about having a website. And
well, it's a balance, right? You have to have adequate marketing skills, but you also have to have an adequate show.
Yeah. Although I can say I have seen a performer who had a successful career for 2 years, which is his goal. All he had was the marketing. He just went to new clients every time. So you can have a career with a terrible show, but it's not going to work real well.
more than ever before. Nowadays you can.
Can I say also one thing that perhaps that I think this depends a lot where you are geographically, that there's a whole generation of young jugglers coming out of the circus schools of Europe and Canada. I think, unfortunately, the US doesn't fall, whose priority is to write applications to convince people to fund them to make their first show. And I think that's a very different way in to working clubs or working the street. But it's a reality for a large part of the jugglers making work at the moment. And so what's weird is that maybe the skill they need is also how to write these applications and how to tick government funding. I think, I don't know how much this affects any of you, but in Europe, this is a whole thing. There's a whole generation of kids that are coming out of school, and their first thing is, who's going to give me free rehearsal space for me to make my first piece? And then one of their stumbling blocks is they're often having to show work without having really performed very much. So they're spending, I don't know, 7 weeks, 8 weeks with an idea, and then having to show it to a bunch of professionals who then decide whether this idea goes forward. And I realize this is a model that's not maybe the things you were describing, but it's an existing professional juggler model. And I think I'm going back to this idea of maybe a juggler in South America needs to think, what is the perfect 2-minute thing that I put in front of a traffic light?
Yeah.
What good trick do I need to finish? How many do you need to do 100 good shows at a traffic light before it's good? I mean, I've never done traffic light shows, but yeah.
Well, yeah, and Sean, that's an excellent point. I mean, this is exactly why we wanted to have a diverse group of people here on the panel, is that what you've described is totally alien to me, but it's a real part of the professional juggler worldwide. So maybe when we iron this down, what the first skill has to be analyzing what it is that you're going to try to do, analyzing what market might get you some income, whether, yeah, it's the stoplight, whether it's writing grants, or whether it's, for me, going down to the farmer's market and getting people to give me a couple bucks when I do some bad tricks. So yeah, the analyzing of what your first step is probably the most important thing.
I have a couple of more advices, if I may. So even though I grew up in a generation where, because I was born in the circus, and when I immigrated, I was able to see all the different circuses that were really, really busy at the time, like Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, and Hannaford, and a whole lot of them. And they would give you a whole year's worth of contracts. Well, now that's not really as lucrative anymore. So I had to evolve with the times as well. And I think that perhaps the suggestion may help jugglers that are just starting out. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Take all the classes you possibly can, from, like you said, clowning, to perhaps ballet or dance or anything that can help you have a better stage presence. Because in my opinion, even if you are a hobbyist, a juggler, you're still a performer. You are still putting on a show in front of whatever audience or whatever the amount of audience that is before you. So I do think stage presence is very important. And then social media is super duper important, where you are where you have to be presentable and dress nice, and your combinations have to be clean. Hopefully not very many drops in a concise video, and keep posting. And like, whether it's on TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook. Like, for example, I juggled, I made a little video with me juggling knives, and it was really silly. I was kind of upset the fact that I only had 3. I really wanted to have 5 and stuff, and I was kind of in my head. But that week I got a couple calls to do a performance with knives. And so social media is everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would add too, we've mentioned a lot of different things, dance and clowning. For me, improv was immensely
Yes.
helpful. One of my anxiety dreams that I would have would be appearing, ladies and gentlemen, Mark Hayward, and I step out on stage and I don't have any props and I don't know where I am or anything. But once I took improv, that dream vanished. Like, it was all fine.
Awesome.
So stage presence is however you can get stage presence. Yes, do it. This is a bit of a difficult question. I was really aiming this, unfortunately, at Mark Neiser, who was going to be part of this panel, but his agent gave him the wrong date for a gig. So he set up last night. It wasn't the gig last night, it was tonight. So unfortunately, Mark couldn't join us tonight. But so I'm wondering how has the number of pros changed at the IJA conventions? I really wanted to know in the last 30 years, but I realized I haven't been going to IJA conventions for 30 years. So how has the number of pros at the IJA conventions changed for it in everyone's view from when you first went? Sean, I know you've been to IJA conventions, but
I can't really talk about the IJA convention, but in Europe, going back to this, and I think it is a bizarre bubble, the subsidized circus school bubble, there are way more people. Because there's also, for example, France has a model where if you decide that you are a performer, and if you can prove that you've done 30 jobs, you get a wage every week for the whole year.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking, it's a different thing. It's a complete.
That's incredible.
And I mean, you hear conversations among, I need 2 years to make a piece. And I think they're conversations for somebody who's working on a commercial market where they need to deliver goods, they would just go, my God, I don't understand you. And I think we are talking about these different, but I would say in the weird European, if we can call it art juggling, but I that's a terrible term, but whatever that is, there's way more people, way. From when I started to now, I mean, there's so many jugglers in Europe. It's crazy. And it's glorious. And because of these, Belgium has a similar system. I think Switzerland might have something like that. Scandinavian countries often will give a grant where you get a couple of thousand a month because you're an artist.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So that's
well, I will admit I have never been to a European convention. I recognize that as a personal flaw. But for the IJA conventions, my first one was in 1992. I've been to almost every single one since. And my impression is that there are far fewer professional jugglers who come now. And it just so no value judgment here. On the panel, how many people are current IJA members? All right, 2 of us. All right, so I guess I want to know, and again, not judging, why or why not? And I'll start this one. For me, I'm a member because when I discovered juggling conventions, I realized that I had found my people, and I wanted to spend every single second that I could at juggling conventions with jugglers. I love the hobbyists. I love the non-jugglers. I love the parents, the siblings. I love the pros. Like, man, everything. I would go to every single convention I can go to. I couldn't love it any more than I do. Most of my favorite people in the world I have met because of the IJA. So for me, it's easy. But let's go down the line. So Bree, how about you?
The IJA has less benefits, in my opinion, than before for my specific interests. And I used to love the Charlie Fry column, eccentrics, with all the variety, weird little tricks. There's nothing like that right now. There used to be insurance benefits. I don't think that exists anymore.
It does, because I get it.
And if there were maybe some more network opportunities, like maybe if there were relationships between the IJA and NECA or IJA and WFA or something like that, that might be more useful for me. But, you know, on my budget, it's not at the top of the list. But I do love the IJA festival, and I will say I enjoy all the people at the IJA.
All right, Michael, how about you? You're a member.
Before I answer, I just want to tell Sean that please let everybody know that I absolutely speak in the French.
Then you need a French passport. I know somebody who can help you.
I think I tried to say it in German, but I think I would love to speak in the French and get paid from the government. So I'm an IJA member, and it's easy for me to be an IJA member because 30 years ago I did the life plan. And so I was really fortunate. I'd like to think, and I'm pretty sure I would still be a member every year, because like Mark said, it was such an eye-opening. I walked into that first IJA gymnasium. It was in Atlanta in '85, and I didn't know that there were that many jugglers in the whole world. I would have guessed that the whole number of jugglers in the whole world was less than the jugglers in that room. And that was one of the 2 or 3 times in my entire life that my jaw dropped. Like, actually, like, wow, that's what that jaw drop expression means. You know, whether there's value in the organization or not, I would still be a part of it. Because to me, in my heart, it's valuable. How much I use it in my daily life now, I'm just glad that I'm still there.
All right. Gina.
The first time I attended a juggling convention was so incredible, because when you're traveling in a circus, you really don't have that. Perhaps you may have another person or two that also knows how to juggle, and then you sometimes fast, but walking into a room full of so many jugglers was just jaw-dropping. And every time that I go to the IJA and perform at the IJA, it feels like home. So I really love it. However, I have missed a couple because it's not, if I have a gig and it interferes with the IJA, I always take the gig. And so luckily and unluckily, I've been busy enough where I wasn't able to attend all of them because I was busy, but anytime I can, I do. So
Sean, I'm kind of skipping you, but if you have something you want to say.
Skip me on this one.
Okay.
So, what is the IJA? No, I'm kidding.
International Jugglers Association.
Yes.
Well, actually, although this year, I don't know if you saw the welcome show. I mean, this year and the last few years, the IJA has become much more international than it's ever been before.
And I congratulate whoever's doing a lot of the. I didn't see the show, but I've been really charmed and delighted at the global and open-mindedness of the last few years of just showing the diversity that juggling can be in all its facets.
Yeah, and this is something. Yeah. And so, this is something where the pandemic has really benefited us because we can have people from around the world. Michael.
So just to answer your question, though, about the number of professionals who go to the IJA. So first of all, if I go in now, it's hard to tell. I don't know who everybody is anymore. There are definitely less professional jugglers there. In my opinion, there's definitely less comedy jugglers there. I think that the IJA has shifted a little bit away from comedy juggling And I can see it probably doing cycles where it's more about the comedy juggling and less about the technical. I think we're definitely in a technicals, you know, a high point right now. For a number of reasons. Certainly, Jason pushed the IJA more technical. Excuse my cough. And then, and you know, with there being less professional jugglers, and I think there are less now, there's less to go. There's also if all the professional jugglers go and they're all hanging out with each other and less of them are going, that's less of incentive for the other professionals to go, because you're not going to see your friends because they're not going. And it just kind of, you know, builds on itself. So, you know, like I said, there might be a lot of professional jugglers there who I don't even know, because I don't really watch that closely who the hotshot 25-year-olds are. But I'm also not sure how many of those hotshot 25-year-olds who are killing it on videos are actually being paid to perform, because I don't know if there's actually markets for them. So if you think about it, where are the professional jugglers now? They're on ships, they're on Renaissance fair circuits, they're doing college circuits. The college circuit performers are available in the summer, but a lot of the other performers necessarily aren't. And there's not a lot of venues, there's not a lot of performers, thus less jugglers at the IJA.
My impression is that there are far fewer professionals at the IJA now, and fewer professionals in the world as a whole, at least in the parts that I see. So now the question is, of course, we are in an IJA forum. We're trying to talk about the world in general, but specifically, how can we help the IJA bring more pros to the convention and to membership in general? And I want to preface everyone's answers by saying, this is in the spirit of constructive criticism. So feel free to say the truth. And they have asked us to do this. So you can say what you really think, and it's okay.
But can I
literally think,
oh, sorry, Bree, go Bree.
Oh, I literally think everybody is told you need to get a 9 to 5. I think in our society here in America, you have a plan and you do A, B, C, D, E, and everybody freaks out if you want to do any part of your life in a different order than that. So there could be representation showing the public, showing young people, it is possible to be a professional juggler.
So representation is your main thing. Yeah, Sean.
Can I rewind? Because I really disagree with that idea that there's less professional jugglers. I think that maybe the US is true, but I would say globally, I am convinced there's way more professional jugglers. And I mean, this is a further more complicated that maybe rejoins what Bree was saying, where, I mean, if you think, say in France, the arts are considered, first of all, say France has free healthcare. And the arts are almost part of that. So we're about to go to France and we're going to perform in a little village, which has a 500-seat theater, and it will be full. Because not necessarily because people know us, because people trust that theater director, and there's been a 30-year investment into thinking art is something that's great. So I think there's a further political thing of investment into the arts. I mean, goodness, that's a much more complex. But I would say that globally, the performance of juggling, and hence the amount of professional jugglers, it is definitely on the up.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So apparently this is a difference with the US versus other places.
But I 100% agree. Yeah, the arts are not respected here in America like they are in Europe. And a young person I did not have the mental capacity to think I could be an artist until I was like 25. Like, it took me that long to realize there's another way to life than having a 9 to 5.
Yeah, because that experience that Sean just described of going to a 500-seat theater in a little town and having it be full, that is totally foreign. That does not happen here. I have organized tours that we've gone around to places here. Mostly the East Coast has the old theaters, and we were doing East Coast tours. We just couldn't get people there. I mean, it was tough.
I think one of the things that's going to help out is, you know, as America's really transitioning to the gig economy, you know, part of the conversation is, what is the definition of a professional juggler? But I think that you're going to, here in America, you're going to see a bunch of my friends, they get hired out as jugglers. They do shows. I book them. They're part of our little boutique circus shows. but they also have side hustles. They also have other income coming in. And, whether it's it could be lots of different things. So, Gina's making costumes, but she's still a professional juggler. Even if Gina's costume business is, a higher percentage of her income, I'm still going to consider her a professional juggler. And I think that that's what you're going to see in America. You might have a killer gig, at a resort that has 1,000 people watching that pays, $5,000, but you're still going to go back and be doing, welding art projects or doing Spanish tutoring midweek, and I think that's what we're going to have. And I already see it, I already look around and I have my friends who are doing, I have a friend who's doing some aerial stuff. And then she also she's an aerialist, but she's also selling tie-dye aerial fabric.
Right. Yeah, everyone's got a side hustle.
I think you almost need to do that.
I don't have a side hustle. I make 100% of my income, well, from my variety show, which is not 100% juggling, but
right. And there are a bunch, but there's not as many. In my professional juggler, I run circus camps for kids. That's related. It's performance.
That counts.
Yeah, it counts.
Right.
Teaching.
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
Can I say one more time? Tell me if I'm using too much time. I am a talker. I realize this. But I also think that this thinking laterally, like I'm convinced the right person will come along or 3 people and do a Broadway show that'll run for 15 years and clean up. I think that there's room for things. I'm sure or here's the question. Could there be a show like Penn and Teller in Vegas that's 2 jugglers?
Right. Well, we've got, the Absinthe show is close to that. The Water on Mars guys did a run on Broadway and it was successful, although short.
And they have a jugglers down in Vegas working at the moment.
Yeah. So let's talk about the now. I want to know from everybody, how did you survive the pandemic, and how will you survive going forward? Bree has one of the particularly great success stories. So Bree, do you want to start?
Sure. I was able to figure out how to do a Zoom show, and I recognized immediately the power of the internet and email marketing and sales. And I was like, boom, this is my chance. The wall that I was talking about for me that's up here went, and I got my stuff together and created a Zoom studio, a Zoom show, and it worked. It totally worked. I did almost 200 virtual events. I still have more virtual events to go. And I entered new markets and I discovered new things, and I'm a much stronger person from it.
Well, and now though, you were just posting on Facebook, I think last week, you had what, 14 live shows in 7 days?
Yeah, so now all the Zoom people are hiring me in person, and they're comparing and contrasting the Zoom show versus the in-person show. And some people are like, oh, the in-person show is so much better. And some other people just recognize it's a totally different show, because on Zoom, so one of my pandemic, okay, I have a secret to tell all the jugglers. I want to be a magician. So I've been learning magic over the last couple of years, and that's very conducive to the Zoom. But the hat manipulation works, the juggling works, as long as you stay here, as long as you do the juggling here. And clowning, like the whole show is based on clowning, some manipulation, some magic, and like lots of absurd, random perspective tricks and illusions. And people loved it. They responded positive to it. It was all word of mouth. And then I was like, I got to learn email marketing. I got to learn my Google SEO. And I can't say I'm an expert at that stuff, but I got better at that stuff and I landed a gig for a corporation, and I did a weekly show that was an hour long every week for too long. I got burnt out. But I did like 20 shows for them. And then they were like, you're so good with the kids. Why don't you lead workshops for our adults and unlock the creativity and playful side in our workers? And then I did all of these like improv workshops through Zoom with the employees, and there is a market in virtual. There will continue to be a market in virtual. And I felt like, as a solo entertainer who has to prove myself to many, many other markets, like the county fairs, for example. I've been trying that for 3 years, and I finally booked my first long county fair. I went to that trade show for 3 years, but for the virtual, it was like, who's awake, who's alert, who's doing it, who's fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking for an opportunity and took it.
Well, I can give the flip side, a much less rosy picture. I did a quick switch to virtual as well to try to salvage shows that I had booked at the beginning of the pandemic. And I managed to salvage a few. I booked a few, but mostly I didn't work during the pandemic. It was a very small number of shows. And now, even this year, I think I've had 8 shows so far in 2021. So yeah, not a whole lot, but I was okay because my whole life I've wanted to buy a house that had multiple units in it. And 2019 was the best year I've ever had by far of my entire career. And I put everything I had into a house, and the rental income paid the mortgage and utilities and sustained me. It totally saved me during the pandemic. So my side hustle came in to protect me. And
Nice.
shows, yeah, and shows are coming back now, but you know, slowly. I'm hoping next summer will be the big one.
That's certainly another secret is along with the side hustles is just it's just side hustles are another way is being diversified. It's diversification.
Yeah. So Michael, how about you? You talked about your graduation mobile. What else did you do to survive the pandemic, and how will you survive going forward?
So I did a bunch of shows. I did a bunch of virtual shows, you know, not as many as I would have liked, but I'm fine with that. You know, they were challenges with them, and they were you know, they were fun. It was nice just to walk into my backyard, you know, go to my studio and do a show. I did, my favorite thing that I did was a creativity workshop where I could actually explain to a public utility company how I create my ideas and how and how they might be able to work with some of my ideas as far as creativity to solve some of their problems. And they're in such a different world than what we're in, with so many regulations and constraints and what they're allowed to do. And they have obstacles every single day. So that was really rewarding for me. I did a little bit of everything, which is what I do all the time anyway. It was very nostalgic getting in touch. It was very nostalgic working for my 1996 pricing. I definitely went and did some jobs. But I also did some jobs that were really fulfilling for me because they were for my longtime clients. And my longtime client would say, look, this is what we're trying to do during COVID. You know, we're on a shoestring budget. We're trying to survive. You know, how do you fit in? What can you do? And it's like, these are people who I've worked with almost, some of them for 26, 27 years. I'm like, I'm available. Pay me what you can. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I know that I'm gonna stick it to you when we all come out of this on the other side. And you know, they would laugh and they get the joke. But I did and actually I'm being faced with another pivot right now. Most of the performers I know are having suddenly, you know, their schedules are going crazy. I don't know if you guys hear this cough, but I find out tomorrow what kind of heart surgery I'm going to get to fix this cough. And so man. In the next 2 weeks, I'm going to get shut down again. And this will be a bigger shutdown. So kind of surprising, but I'm sitting here thinking, I'm going to come up with something completely cool while I'm stuck on the couch for a couple of weeks. And I can't wait to see what it is. I have no idea what it is, but I'm going to come up with something cool.
Wow.
Wow. We'll be thinking of you, my friend.
Yeah. Sending plenty of love for that. Sean.
So something else too, it caused me to, I got to tinker at home with some ideas that had been on the shelf for a while. So one of the things was, you know, I finally figured out how to rig the tight wire off the roof of my stage truck. And that was something that I would have had to do on site at a big event I had scheduled in July of 2020. That got canceled. And now I had like 2 weeks in my driveway just to play around and try different setups and stuff. And it actually made it less stressful when I did have to do it.
Nice. Sean, you also had a pretty major success during the pandemic with the opera.
Oh, the opera was just before. So we were lucky. We got the opera done. So we've done the opera 4 times, once in LA, once in New York at the Met, and it's going back to the Met. Actually, the opera to me is an interesting thing because it's been incredibly successful in terms of a very elitist art audience. And I think on paper, when the director first presented it to the kind of big opera directors, a lot of them went, it'll never work. You can't put juggling into an opera. It won't sell. And I think that makes me think of how often we do that to ourselves. We kind of go, my market, I couldn't possibly work that other market. And I mean, I feel like the opera is a great example of that. It was, I think, the second most successful opera at the Metropolitan Opera House. And a lot of people hadn't seen juggling, or at one point we were there and there was Big Apple Circus next to us. And it kind of amused me that we had 12 jugglers at the opera and there was 2 really good ones at Big Apple, but that we had more. But we had a fascinating year in that we shut down. We didn't shut down, we kept the office going, but we went from doing 100 shows a year to 6. But it made me rediscover how much I love juggling. I'm lucky, I'm fortunate, I'm married to the most fabulous juggler. And we just juggled every day for like 7 hours. And normally if I say to my wife, like now we're back in that thing, can I work on this idea where we have 3 rings and a ball and I bounce it there? And she goes, oh no, I need to rehearse that show and that show. And all of a sudden she didn't have anything to rehearse. So it would just, and I realized that the real reason why one does the love of the craft of juggling, that in a way, even if I wasn't transforming it into money, I think I would still do it every day because I love it and care for it so much. I mean, I miss performing incredibly, but yeah.
Oh, that's great. So Gina, we're going to get to you in just a second, but I first want to say we've got just a couple minutes left for our discussion part, but we're going to do questions from the audience. So everyone out there in internet land, if you have questions you'd like to ask any of us on this topic, please put it in the chats. We've got somebody who will get it to me and we will talk about your questions as much as we can. So while everyone's getting their questions funneled through the magic of the internet to us, Gina, it's your turn to answer this question. How did you survive the pandemic?
Okay, cool. So financially speaking, I was able to live in the same house with my in-laws, my whole family. And so that helped a lot. And unlike Europe, the first time ever, America has helped out artists with unemployment. So that has helped so much as well. And I realized that I've been working since I was 9 years old. So I was okay with just not doing anything for a little bit of time. And congratulations to everybody that made it work virtually. You guys have evolved with the times. And I mean, that's fantastic. I, on the other hand, was so tired of my screen. I wasn't interested in doing anything virtual because it just kind of made me sad. And I just didn't feel like it. So also, my costume orders slowed down a little bit because my clientele are performers and they have lost all their jobs. So that took a little bit for it to come back. And now it's all coming back, knock on wood. I'm incredibly happy about it. However, it's coming back pretty strong. So even though when the world started to open, I felt like, was I unproductive? Did I not do enough? I started to have regret of not doing enough. And now that I am trying to fit in 27 hours into 24 hours of working, I was glad that I just kind of took it easy and had weeks where I just didn't feel like doing anything. So
yeah. It's funny how much everyone's different experiences, it all resonates. So we do have some questions coming in from the people. And actually, before we get there, we've got 2 questions. So audience, keep bringing your questions in. Let's get more of those. But I've got one last one that I'm going to cover from my list. I believe that only 2 of us on this panel are parents, so I can't speak to this one. But can those of you who are parents, can you speak a little bit to what it's like to be a parent and a performer?
Gina, you go first.
Sure. I remember I took Mace. Mace is my son. He's 10 years old. I took him to one of my contracts before COVID, so a couple of years ago, where I had to perform 3 shows every day. So he got sick of my shit. I just no longer impressed him. And I took him to a show about a couple of days ago, and he watched me perform and he missed it. And so he came over to tell me how epic he thought I was. And to hear that from a kid that's online all day long and sees the coolest stuff I was really happy. I'm happy he thinks I'm cool. But anyway, as far as being a parent, well, I think it's tricky because I would like to do some longer gigs, but Mace has school, so I have to make sure that I come back so he starts school on time, and my husband helps me with that so much. So I think it's always a challenge to figure out schedules, but I always tell myself that that's how we've lived, that's how we've done it before, and so going forward, we'll just figure it out.
So clearly, there's pros and cons to being a professional entertainer and having kids in the house. I never really took gigs that would keep me away from the house for more than 10 days. I don't think I was
agree.
on for more
Completely
than 10 days
agree.
until my kids were in college. Just another example of less performers. We had 3 professional entertainers in my house, and now we're down to 1. But both of my kids are exceptional. Those are people who know them, just unbelievable accomplishments. And I blame some of that on them growing up in the world. They would perform with me as much as they wanted to, or as little as they wanted to growing up. But they're both fabulous public speakers. They both have learned so much about learning, in that you want to learn a trick, you try it, you mess up, you try it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have a great attitude to learning new things, and that they see that the progress comes over time. And my son would be, cramming for an exam or studying for an exam the night before, and he'd be practicing juggling in the living room at 11 o'clock at night. And it's like, don't you have studying to do? And it was more about the fact that he learned that 10 minutes of juggling in the living room was way better than that 10 minutes in the textbook. And, both my kids are, college for free, and scholarships out the wazoo, and just, scores, just amazing. And I blame a lot of it on being jugglers, and, their ability to communicate, public speaking, and everything. Yeah. And so I think it was great, but I did miss a lot of things growing up. I missed the championship of the soccer tournament. I missed the big art exhibit, at school. And, I know that at times it was challenging for them. They're going to a prep school with all the other kids or parents or doctors and lawyers. And what's your dad do? When my dad wears a kilt and juggles, it's super formal. And, but at the same time, though, when it was time for my daughter, who, as a girl going through college, through high school, is this cool? Is this not cool? Well, it was time to do her college essays, and growing up in a house full of traveling circus performers passing through at all hours of the night, that led for a great introduction on her college essay and my son's college essay. So I'm standing in an industrial marketplace in Sri Lanka, trying to gather components to build a tight wire rig. You might be asking, how did I get here? That was his college essay. It's like, nice. So, there are times they missed me and I missed their stuff, but there were times where it worked out, it was great.
Michael, cool. I really liked hearing what you have to say about that, because I am the same way, where I don't want to take contracts too long. Before it was about maybe 4 days, and now I'm up to 10 days that I can take a gig and come back with my husband's help. But I think I'm a cooler parent because I'm a juggler, because I throw everything to Mace. Everything. And I know that in normal households, you have to be proper with all the things in your house. So I don't know, it makes it more fun.
Nice. We've got a whole bunch of great questions from the audience, and cool. we've in fact got more than we can answer. So sorry to the people whose questions that we don't get to. But this is one that ties into something that I wanted to bring up anyway. How does the state of the hobbyist juggler impact the state of the professional juggler? And I want to quote a friend of mine who we had at MadFest many years ago, and I haven't seen her since, but Nella Von Zerboni. We were talking about this. She's a Diablo artist, and she said, her quote was, "The hobbyists are killing us," because as professionals, they would strive so hard for perfection and high-level tricks, and then the hobbyists who have all this time in the world are doing these incredible things that they can't ever do on stage. So let's start with the European influence. Sean, how are the hobbyists affecting the professionals?
Well, I don't have that distinction in my mind. To me, like I say, I love what's happening in juggling at the moment. I really feel like we're in the golden age. And to me, if somebody shows me juggling, it's irrelevant. I get going back to that idea that a professional juggler is transforming juggling somehow into money. And to me, that's an irrelevant thing to the quality of their juggling. Some of the best jugglers I know are quite bad at transforming their juggling into money. I know some people who are the opposite, who I would say are not necessarily the most stellar jugglers, but are very good at transforming whatever it is they have. But the hobby word is terrible. But the enthusiastic, the creative jugglers, I think they feed me all the time. I love devouring everything that's out there, and I mean I can't keep up. There's so much of it, but I feel like a kid in the sweet shop. There's just so many people doing beautiful, incredible research, and I love the fact that it's sometimes not financially motivated. Like if I may briefly there's a strange micro passing world of people that get really nerdy about passing patterns. And I love the fact that it's totally yeah, absolutely. And now there's all these German, a lot of German women, and it's so glorious. And they come up with these really complex variations with 7 people, and it's so not financially motivated or artistic motivated. I almost feel like it's a little branch of mathematics that they're exploring, but it feeds in everything in the same way that somebody says to an abstract mathematician, your math is totally useless and pointless. And then 40 years down the line, it comes into the building of some rocket. I think the really complicated variations with 4 clubs and one day will come in very handy.
Well, and you bring up a good point that the whole premise of this panel discussion is that we are defining professional juggler in, presumably in similar ways as someone who makes money through juggling. And we have another question from Morgan, saying that we seem to be defining professional jugglers as artists and entertainers. How would juggling in the Olympics affect entertainment and art juggling? And I think it's important to acknowledge we had to make some sort of distinction, even though, at least in my opinion, all the jugglers are great. I love everybody. There's no value judgment here. We're going to talk about it as an industry. But yeah,
I feel like anybody who appreciates juggling can only elevate juggling, and we can only hold each other up higher and higher. A hobbyist, a professional, hobbyist, professional, like as long as you have enthusiasm and appreciation for it, it can only get more positive.
But I think there is a little bit of a separation when it comes to people that focus on perfecting the routine that they have created to the point where this is what I do, this is what I'm sure of, and that's what I'm going to perform. And sometimes even me, myself, we get stuck in that routine. And then when we see people that don't necessarily do juggling for a living, we see this just explosion of inspiration and tricks that we have never seen before. So, I mean, that's why IJA is so great, is that you can come and see both sides of our industry.
Yeah.
I feel like they appreciate us. They appreciate the people who work, and that's better. That's better for us. The more hobbyist jugglers out there, the better for us, because they can talk about us. They can spread the word if they're demonstrating stuff and it's good. Other people are more likely to think about us, and they also help. Some of them probably help, defer the fact that a lot of the world thinks we're clowns. You know how to juggle, oh, you must be a clown. Yeah. So if there's somebody who's out there who's doing a good job as a juggler, even if it's in the park and they're not wearing a red nose and they're doing 5 club back crosses, which many of the hobbyists now can, that's yeah. Good. That promotes what we do in a good, healthy way.
Anybody else want to?
Just a quickie on juggling in the Olympics. In a way, juggling is rhythmic gymnastics. The last European, if you have time to just look it up on YouTube, they had a competition with 5 balls, and it's only women, and it's the most mind-blowing thing.
Oh, wow.
And it's definitely, if you have time to look it up, it was a European rhythmic gymnastics competition. And this year they all had a team event with 5 balls, and most of the teams juggled a bit. And it's just so.
That's amazing. I'll check that out.
It's
Awesome.
fantastic.
Awesome. All right. So we've got a couple very specific questions which are related. So I'm going to read them both, and we can hopefully mix our answers all together. Colin wants to know, what's the best way to combine stand-up and juggling? Do you comment on the tricks you're doing or completely ignore the fact that you're juggling? And then related, but a little broader, Taylor Tries has asked, do you have any advice on creating an act for those who don't have access to circus schools or mentors, especially in the United States of America?
Yeah, look at Taylor's videos. She will explain everything there is about juggling.
But she's the one asking.
My answer remains.
Well, I
In
will,
regards
go ahead.
to the content of comedy juggling, that's where it's such free license. Like, you can do whatever you want. I have stuff where I'm talking about, yeah, maybe the juggling tricks, but mostly I'm telling like wild stories or history that's made up or embellished and about me. You can do whatever you want, which is a terrible answer. You just gotta like write it down and try a bunch.
Well, I think that for me, I think of it as find the fun. That what makes somebody interesting on stage is when they are loving what they're doing. So it is, you know, I understand Colin's question of that you've got the jokes and you've got the tricks and you have to, do you combine them? How do you combine them? I totally get it because I've been through that a bunch. But I think the real answer is just as vague as your answer, Bree, that you have to figure out who you are and what you do.
You have to figure out who you are.
Yeah, and what you do on stage that people want to watch, because the persona that everyone presents on stage is not 100% of their everyday life. You take a piece of who you are and you amplify it and use it in that context. So you have to find out what piece of you will work with the things you want to put together, and which part of that piece is the thing that people will want to watch, and magnify that and work on it and refine it. Does anyone want to address more directly the advice on creating an act without access to a circus school?
Oh, can I say briefly that looking at parallel art forms, I've always found, so maybe looking at the structure of comic strip books or Motown, how a Motown song structured. So I think there's a lot about how, if you want to make a commercially successful, the 6 minute, assuming we were saying that maybe there isn't room for that 6 minutes, but analyzing how other art forms deliver the perfect 6 minutes. How's a sitcom structured? Analyzing structure all around, I think, is very, at least to me, very helpful.
Absolutely. Taking influence from other areas is helpful, or taking a trick that you do with one object and doing it with a different object. That sort of cross-pollination is really super valuable.
I think
Going along that tip of cross-pollination, creating a small group of trusted people, maybe from, I work with clowns or burlesque performers, me, magicians, we all get together and we do work in progress sessions. We show each other our budding material and we help each other. So I think collaboration is key. A lot of people don't like that because they're afraid of people stealing jokes. I haven't experienced that, but I like collaboration.
Yeah, to piggyback on what Bree said, that's exactly the answer. Is you might not be able to get to a circus school, but you can find mentors and you can find your little group. And the only people that I can really think of who would, and there's many, who could actually develop an act without any other input is somebody like Michael Motion or Greg Kennedy, who's more of an artistic thing, and it's all about their vision. But for everybody else, I would and I do this all day long. People like, hey, do you think this is funny? And I tell them my latest joke. I'm bound, the mailman. Hey, do you think this is funny if I do this? I'll ask anybody. But I also have a group of people who, you know, you can get together and bounce things off of. And especially if you can bring one of those people to one of your shows where you're going to try something. And of course, the other thing you can do too is videotape yourself. So if you're performing someplace, videotape yourself. And then you go back and you watch it and you can critique yourself and get all kinds of ideas. And, you know, when we used to do Motion Fest, that was what, you know, that was like the number one suggestion was do it, videotape it and watch it.
Well, I think that's exactly right. I think that people who are not on stage or are not performing much it's easy to get the idea that it's one person doing one thing all by themselves. But I've spent so much time in rooms writing jokes, talking about tricks, talking about props, construction. Like I have a vast network of people that I consult with anytime I'm working on something, and they do the same thing. When I was asked to host one of the IJA shows, it was the championships many years ago, I put together a comedy writing team. I had a group of like 8 people who were helping me get enough material so I would actually be able to do the performance. So I think that the community we have in juggling and in variety arts in general, and thank you IJA, is the community makes all of us stronger. We all are better for having the input of our peers.
There's one more thing too, Taylor. Another way of going about this is, suppose, you know, if you have 10 minutes of good material that you're comfortable with now, and you can go someplace and book yourself for 15, or offer somebody an extra 5 minutes and put in something that's a little bit new. Maybe it's a little risky, and to see how it works. And that's a good way to, you know, I'll bury something brand new in the middle of my show, you know, around stuff that I've done. And, you know, then I can always, if it flops, then I can bounce back with my finale that I know is, you know, likely going to work. Or somebody else's finale, which is better than mine.
Don't do that. Do not.
Joke.
Anyone else want to comment on that? We've got a question from Ash Raito. How do you keep advancing and get past learning curves or frustration? I'll actually start on this one. I think that you often see when you're hanging out with your juggler variety artist friends, people saying, I'm not juggling as much. I haven't worked on my 5 balls anyway. You know, beating themselves up about whatever it is they feel like they're not doing enough of. And I have always told myself that it's really important to ride the waves of your interest. That if you are excited about spin tops today, man, you work on spin tops and you get that down, and then you'll come back to your 5 balls or your 5 clubs, or, you know, whatever it is that you're working on. And don't beat yourself up, but just focus on the things that are making you happy at the moment, and hopefully that will keep you going through the tough parts. Somebody else. Gina. I'm sorry, Bree.
Oh, go ahead, Gina. I've been talking a lot. I just realized that.
What was that question? Because I wanted to do a little quick shout out to Ivan Paselic. He was talking about the dead bodies behind me.
Yeah.
These are called mannequins. He's just jealous because my studio has more glitter than his pockets do. But hi. Anyway, what was the question?
So the question is, how do you
That made me laugh.
how do you keep advancing, and how do you get past learning curves or plateaus or frustration?
But I think that's so different for everybody. I think
Good question.
I was listening to Nick Cave today, and he's got a song called There She Goes, My Beautiful World, which is about the way that different people dealt with writer's block, from kind of Karl Marx to Dylan Thomas. And I guess a juggler, I've been fortunate. I haven't had the block where you don't like juggling anymore, but it's such a personal thing, and inevitably that's going to come. And maybe it's time to move to something else, but maybe it's a dip and it comes back in a nice, new, beautiful form.
Yeah, me too. I've never had a juggling block. What I did have was just sometimes I didn't really feel like practicing very much. And so really what helps is inspiration, and seeing other jugglers is a huge inspiration to me. And that really what just fires me back up. Unfortunately, in Sarasota, Florida, I don't have very many juggling clubs around me. So anytime that I can make it to the IJA or see my friends, just boosts my inspiration and juggling spirit so much. And the way that I get past through the frustrations of not being able to do a trick is I can't be mad at anything really. It's just I got to put more hours into practice and know that one day it will get better. So,
and just like with having a workout buddy, it's the same thing with practicing. It's nice to have a practice buddy to keep you going.
Yeah.
I experienced a lot of I experienced not wanting to do anything after like seeing a bunch of people on the internet doing so much more amazing things than me. I shut it all off and I went internally and I just hung out with myself and made myself show up for the work.
That does happen.
5 minutes a day, 4 days a week. That's the bare minimum when I'm like at my lowest. Well, the lowest is nothing, but when I'm ready to try, 5 minutes a day, 4 days a week. And you got to put it on the calendar. And I also like habit trackers, and then you put a sticker on the calendar because it works for me.
Juggling historian David Kane has asked, it seems to me that there are many more jugglers and a lot less venues than 20 years ago. Would you agree with that? And how do you think professional jugglers can deal with it?
I would go back to thinking laterally that one needs to find different places, and I'm sure we'll find them. And yeah,
I think that there are fewer venues, but I think there are also fewer pros fighting for those venues. but yeah,
I mean, the new venues are like TikTok and Instagram, like, but then I don't know how you turn that into money, but there is a way.
It is possible. I know people who've made a little bit. I make a little bit off of YouTube. Marcus Monroe has done very well off of Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube, I think. He's kind of all over the social media. So he's definitely a shining example of how you can make money doing that. And anybody else want to hit that one? How do you deal with that? Or is that an issue? Fewer venues and more jugglers?
What? Oh, I can. Actually, this is perfect because I wanted to add. Remember, we were talking about if there's any advice, suggestions we can give to up and coming jugglers. I feel that every city has their own entertainment company that calls and says, "Are there aerialists? Are there jugglers?" So go on the internet and find an entertainment company near you and send them your stuff and keep making videos and broaden your, so it's not just a stage so that you can perform outside. I bought these beautiful LED clubs that I sometimes do corporate events, whether it's ambiance, which isn't like my most favorite thing ever, but it's work and it's money and I can do it. When I bought the LED clubs and I was able to do evening gigs outside, I can't believe how I didn't have that before. So yeah, save money, buy props, make videos, contact entertainment companies near you.
Big thing for me is the advertising on social media, and be different. Be different from everybody else. You know, be unique, be creative, be the only person that does what you do or better than the other people around you, so that you are the client's not best choice, only choice.
There have been a bunch of comments in the chat about that it feels a little weird to not have a juggling social media influencer on the panel, somebody like Josh Horton or Taylor Tries. And I would say, yeah, that's a great point. We decided we wanted to have 5 panelists, and there's only, excuse me, there's only so much you can do when you have 5. Either of them would have been a great contribution. I've spent some time with both Josh and Taylor and seen sort of how their workday goes. And yeah, it's fascinating. When your main thing is video, your day is completely different than my normal day. It's, you know, planning, writing down the shot list, or getting whatever you need ready for the video, doing the shooting, and then of course doing the editing. And editing can take forever. It's amazing. But yeah, I mean, what Taylor and Josh do is incredible. I know that they both have income from it. I can't speak to how much or how well they're doing, but it appears they're both doing pretty well. And yeah, this may be the social media influencers may be the face of the future of juggling, which leads me to the last question I have. What is the future of professional juggling?
Can I don't know. The future of juggling is fantastic because it's just been growing and getting more and more beautiful and diverse, and I can't get more excited about where we're at right now and the possibilities coming. And I think the post-COVID world will change the way we sell and market things, and
Yeah.
And I greatly look forward to seeing the new ways that people create to share this beautiful art form.
Nice. Gina?
That was perfectly put. I think that right now everybody's starved for entertainment. So I think gigs and conventions and events are going to come back. I think more people are going to be juggling together. And the future is bright, and definitely social media has become such a strong force in the last year or two. And that has been really great, because now we're able to see jugglers from all over the world. And I've been really happy seeing Aaron travel so much and bring to light all the incredible jugglers all around the world in places that you didn't even think that they knew about juggling. But everybody's juggling, and so I'm happy to be a part of it.
Nice. Yeah, Erin Stevens with her the regional competitions. Michael, what do you think is the future of professional juggling?
I think right now it's kind of it's very transitional. You know, is it going to be the social media influencers? Is it going to be the Josh Hortons and the Taylors? They're certainly not going away. The question is will the public, are they still going to want to see live performances? What's their interest in that? And what Dan Holtzman brought up, the America's Got Talent thing. What's that doing to our industry right now? I see there's some negatives coming in from all different angles, but with every one of these negatives, there's still some positives. I think it's going to be about whether the people who do this for a living can figure out how to monetize it, how to stay relevant, how to find venues, how to make themselves, a commodity that people are going to need and want. And, what's going to happen with some of the different markets that are out there. The cruise ship market's going to is going to come back big, but are they going to come back and spend money on the entertainers? They go through cycles where they bring in extra entertainers, and then they go through a period where they say, okay, we're just going to have one show a week and we'll just play 3 movies because we make more money that way. So, every time a market takes a big hit, whether it's, all the people who run their fairs and county fairs and state fairs, they're all in their 80s. Are there going to be new people coming along to replace them and run these county fairs? Or the county's going to say, we got 190 acres that's sitting here used for 2 weeks. We can make more money with that land doing something else. So, if that were to happen, that would be a huge hit to a lot of people. So the markets are constantly changing. The agents are primarily gone. So, are you going to want to get on Gig Salad and Bash and those things where it's kind of almost in a sense competing for it's almost like a race to the bottom on price, or can you set yourself apart and be a commodity that's unique that people are going to want? And there's people doing good work out there.
We got to give Bree a little bit of time here. The final word, Bree, in our
time for me to interrupt Rosman.
Yes. Please.
I think that a professional juggler is juggling for the reason of connection, and I don't know enough about the industry to know what's in the future, but I'm going to continue to connect with people, inspire as many people as I can, and get that emotional hook where we all do need to raise our rates, elevate our prices, where those people will appreciate us for what we're bringing, and the future is connection.
And I would like to say, for my personal self-interest, everyone who's watching, make sure you come to all the festivals. Come to the next festival. I want to see you at the IJA next year. If we can do it, we're going to do a Juggler's Gauntlet. I want to see you at all the regional conventions. Let's hang out. Let's have a great time. That brings us to the end of this panel. Thank you so much, panelists. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And we'll see you on the internet the rest of this week.
Hey, thanks, Mark.
Great. Thank you, Mark.
Bye, everybody.
Oh, we're all leaving. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, man.